Matt, well, Matt was talking. Matt, do you want to finish out your thought?
Oh, I think Andrew and I were kind of both ending that at the same time, but
Okay.
no, it was, like as I mentioned, I just it was great having them both here. It was great seeing perspective from larger developer on timelines, and has been has been my kind of experience is these things take such a long time. We're looking locally on the local level here at the buttermilk project, and it's like, when's that going to progress? It's like, who knows? So, all these things add up to the current issues we have now. And, do we need some regulatory review? Right. I mean, there's obviously part of that. You know, anyways.
Connie, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. Sure. I'm in agreement with what's been said so far, so thank you for saying that. I'm also very interested in the diversity of different things. Little tiny things make a difference. Maybe they're not so tiny. Working on improving or streamlining the process for developers so that Richmond is more functionally or practically welcoming. And I have no idea how difficult or hard it is, but there's a whole list of different kinds of I think of them as interventions, things you can do to help stuff move along. Another example was showing up at DRB meetings and saying, we've reviewed this with the developer. We're really in support of this. This is what it does to support housing and other town goals. It's not like one bullet, one dose of medicine answers all the problems. It's a bunch of little things that you engage a community in doing, and you don't just come to housing committee meetings. You show up in other places. Your representation is about housing in all the other places that it shows up. So so my perspective on the housing committee and what it can do was really broadened just by listening to these two speakers. And I really began to appreciate more. Yes, it does take a long time, and yes, there's a diversity of things that we can help attend to depending upon what next would make most difference for Richmond. So, can't say more than that because I don't really understand that much, but I understand my potential role in the housing committee differently, and I really appreciated that. So that was my thought, Mark.
Yeah, and I would like to, Connie, I appreciate that kind of discussion. So I just recently joined the DRB here, and I've been involved in a lot of DRB discussions in other towns based on my projects. And the thing that really still gets me is that the DRB is obviously voluntary. However, it makes such binding decisions, and it still requires obviously a quorum. And for example, in Starksboro right now, I have to go before the DRB to just condominiumize a duplex for building to sell his townhouses there. And I spoke with the zoning administrator today, and she said, I said, well, can I get on the August meeting? I know it's kind of short term. No. Okay, well, how about September? Well, we don't know if we'll have a quorum, and well, what about October? Maybe. And I'm like, whoa, and so I think as a housing committee, something simple we could do would be recommend to the planning commission or select board, probably in this case, actually, that they should try to get more members on, because it can happen in Richmond too. I think there's 7 members, Keith, on the DRB, right?
Yes, well, there's 5 and two alternates.
Right, and maybe we should try to double that. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's like, if we're stopping projects because I'm on vacation or somebody else is on vacation or whatever, I mean, it's months and months and months, and it's like, oh, well, whatever, but that all adds up. And I feel like that's a real simple short-term step on the local level we could do to, hopefully.
Well, keep in mind that a quorum is, has to be one more than half.
Yeah.
Of what it is. So if you have 11, you're going to need 6. And so it's all gradually.
so it does cascade like that. I didn't
Yes.
realize that it wasn't a minimum. Oh, okay. All right.
No.
Disregard.
But you could have 4 alternates,
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a lot, but yeah, I hear you as staff to those committees for a couple decades now.
Yeah.
In Vermont, again, I cut my teeth in New York, but in Vermont, you are volunteers. You're not paid. In New
Right.
York, you're paid. $75 a meeting.
Yeah.
And that's that's an impetus to really start studying, coming prepared.
Right.
Yeah, attendance has always been a problem. This current planning commission is politically, I'd say polarized politically, but they're polarized in the way that they see how Jelena Court needs to be moved forward, for good or for bad. I mean, it doesn't matter. I have no opinion on that, but it puts a major roadblock of time.
Yeah.
When these lines in the sand constantly get moved. But
Right.
that's what we're dealing with. And I agree 100%. We need 2 more members on that board stat, because we have lost quorums because of the lack of participation. So we're down to 5 there, and 4 is a quorum on that board.
Right. And if it's not just we're just talking 2 towns that I've done business in, live in Richmond and Starksboro, right? And now it's like, well, how many other towns does this happen to, right?
Yep.
And
Well,
anyways,
a lot of rural towns it happens to. Obviously the bigger towns, they're much more engaged. They have a bigger pool of people.
right.
So a couple things just from the discussion last month was, I think I had asked a couple questions about how they went about building support from the town, the citizens in the town around affordable housing, around housing in general. And I got a sense, I think from Carl, that while important, there was just a recognition that no matter where you are, you're going to have the NIMBYism, not in my backyard type sentiment. And it seemed to me it was maybe less of a focus for them, and their focus was more on developing good processes, focusing on the merit of the project, and feeling good about the process and the project, and in terms of approving something versus making sure that there's full townwide support, right, on a project, which you're never going to get. So I think that just changed a little bit of my perspective there. The other thing I heard, I think more from Ben, was around the inclusionary zoning. I feel like in some of the discussions I've had here on this committee that I get a sense that inclusionary zoning might, or I get a sense that on this committee that committee folks have thought that developers really hated inclusionary zoning. Maybe they do. It didn't seem like that was something that Carl did not like, right? Or it's not Carl, Ben did not like, and was able, felt like he's able to work around it. It wasn't going to make or break a project for him. I think the difference, though, is maybe his project was on a lot bigger scale than what we might find here in Richmond. So maybe it didn't have as much of an impact. If we're talking about, 2 of 20 units versus, 10 of 100 units, right? It didn't have able to spread that across the other units, right? More. But it was, I think, just a different voice or a different angle around maybe some preconceived ideas around inclusionary zoning and some of those policies that developers might need to move through to have some units that are more affordable.
Yeah,
and then the other, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark. No, go ahead. Finish your thoughts, please.
And then, just some of his thoughts, again, Ben's thoughts around being the process, having a process, having, you know, committees taking a more realistic approach versus an idealistic approach, right? And yeah, focusing on the process, the committees, the town staff, etc.
Yeah, I mean, and then to add on to that thought, which was kind of the avenue I was going down, predictability. I mean, that's really the bottom line. And I know Matt and Andrew can totally talk to that. You know, you look at a zoning regulation and it's not predictable and it leads you down these paths that just are, you know, contradictory. It's just a huge waste of time. It really is. And your zoning code here is antiquated. I mean, it needs to be modernized. There's no doubt about that. But there are people in the town that don't want change, and that's something that developers are gonna, you know, in every town, is gonna have an issue with. So, I mean, what I got out of that conversation, especially from Ben, was predictability. You know, we need to know what the heck is here. You know, that we can understand within the zoning regulations.
Yeah, I've worked with Ben for years and I know exactly what they target and what they look for. And at the end of the day, their goal is always to produce and present a conforming project because they know they're going to have NIMBYs. They're going to have people that will slow it down. There's a bat, there's a endangered plant, whatever it is that they're going to use to slow that doesn't fit the nature of the community or whatever. But if he knows it's conforming, they won't stop it. If he's persistent enough, it takes that time to get there. But if they're able to identify a conforming project, and in some zip codes, you can't really tell what's going to be conforming. A lot of layers of town zoning will contradict itself because they're over 3 decades. So they'll focus their energy and their time and their money in places where they know what they're getting into and they look at a lot.
Yeah, time is money. I mean, it just is.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, it's, you know, when Richmond updated the planning commission and then the select board voted on it, the updated zoning they just passed for the village commercial district here, there's, you know, and I'm very experienced in this, and I looked at it and I was like, okay, good. I filled everything. Everything's good. I'm conforming. And then there's a whole separate set of what are considered now multi-family housing standards. I was building a single family home, but because there was already a duplex on it, you know what I mean? And these, I'll be honest, to actually conform 100% to these multifamily housing standards is, wow, that would be, because anybody can say, I don't like the way your window is in your house or whatever.
Right.
And so anyways, long story short, man, we did such a great job passing these updated standards, and then we hamstrung it by having, you know, a asterisk essentially attached to it. And it's not just Richmond that's done this. Many places are doing this. And
Yep, it's a balance. It's a balance when you're writing these laws. I mean, it really is, because you have to balance what's going on in that actual neighborhood too, and get buy-in. So, I mean, we're balancing that. But no, I agree. Predictability is the name of the game. Again, time is money.
Great. Well, thank you, Andrew, for bringing in Ben, and Connie for reaching out to Carl to invite him in last month. And I'd say if there are others on the short list that we might want to bring in for a future meeting, I know Carl did have some folks that he had recommended. We're open to that, scheduling that in the future. All right. Switching gears here. Anything else? Well, anything else on the discussion recap, debrief?
I guess the only thing I'll add, I found it interesting that, I mean, they're a very well-established housing committee. What do they say, 2005 or so, 19 years.
Yep.
So they've been able to think through more purposefully than we've had an opportunity to do in our 4 years. I find it interesting that anybody that wants to pass through Heinsberg with what I think he said 8-unit or more, they have to sit down and meet with the housing committee. So something that we could work towards. I know we're going to talk later today about what's 2024 and beyond look like, what's our vision, our scope. And if we were presented with an opportunity like that, what is it that we have to really keep digging into? What is it that we think we need? And I know there's been these extensive studies and this time and energy put in, but where is that opportunity, and how can we structure some recommendations to folks to move that along, so we actually have some housing stock that's available?
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good transition. So I think just some of the discussion and updates. What I'd like to do for the remainder of this year is work on that the strategies document. I think I shared that with the team here in email. It's in our folder. I don't know if it made it up on the website, Keith, but and I don't know how does that work? If it's like a working document, does that need to be on?
No, I wouldn't put it on the website until it's a final product, but I
Okay.
want to make sure everybody has access to the shared folder. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just hoping that they have access to it. I sent a
Yeah.
link an updated link last week.
Okay. You're talking about everyone on the committee has access to the shared folder? Yeah.
Correct. Well, they're the only ones that have access to it.
Okay.
And
Great.
myself.
So we won't get folder bombed
Right.
in our folder right here. Okay. So I don't know if Connie or Matt or Andrew, if you had a chance to look at that document, but I think it's something that I'd like to continue on and fold in some of these like learnings that we learned from Carl and Ben, and obviously expertise here on the committee as well.
What was the exact name of it again? Because I'd rather look at it through the OneDrive folder as opposed to in the email.
It's RHC working doc.
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
I mean,
folder. So strategies to encourage subsidized
that's what I thought.
housing in
Okay.
Richmond. Yep. So it's that one right there, and I can
If
share.
if you want me to place it on the homepage, that's not a problem either. I mean, I could do that for the homepage for each meeting, and then we could just work through it, next time.
Either way, I agree the centralized location is easier to work from, just like Google Drive. So it's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. That's cool.
All right, let me just share the screen here. So I had sent this out, and really, this has been a like collection of notes and kind of topic headlines that we've discussed in some past meetings. And the thought is that we can, the bold headlines are kind of each maybe section or subsection, which are also open to adjustment. But the thought is that we can work to divide and conquer on the different sections here by kind of answering these questions up above, like what is our current, like what do we currently have in place? This would be like just looking, if we're talking about water and sewer regulation and policy, right? What do we currently have? What's our current assessment? And I'm not talking about writing pages and pages and pages on this, but understanding like where we are now, where do we want to go? And then, how do we know that we've arrived, or how do we know we have made progress on that front? So seeing this document as our maybe developed our roadmap as to, all right, what are those levers? What are those different areas that we can influence, whether it's processes within the town, whether it's, we talk about water sewer, whether it's, do we want to venture into a housing fund, right? What are we doing around community support, community outreach, zoning regulations, et cetera, right? And so by developing each of these sections, I think we can put together a good like recommendation doc, or just that for and guide for both our committee and for our town on how we see we can encourage subsidized workforce housing in Richmond. So what are your thoughts on it? Um, does that sound like we're going in the right direction?
I think it's good to kind of start kind of organizing in that way, and it does allow each of us to kind of to pick off something we like, you know,
Right.
or it's important that we think is important.
Yeah, or have an interest in, and maybe there are some that don't get chosen, and we'll just have to figure out how to maybe address that. Right.
Just so I know how to wrap my head around it and approach it, once we're satisfied, what's the end goal? Is that what we're looking to determine the end goal is, or is like when we're done building this out, where does it go? And just so I know how to brainstorm for myself.
So here's for an example. Like I know Virginia said she couldn't attend tonight. I know it's something you brought up as well in the past, like water and sewer regulation. Like I think the committee has seen this as a potential impediment to development in Richmond in terms of the process for extending the sewer lines, water and sewer lines, right? So the idea would be like, hey, we as a committee recommend changing our process, maybe modeling it after another town or something along those lines, right? And maybe we take that to the Water and Sewer Commission and say, here's why we are looking at potential making some recommendations for how the regulations could be updated to allow for more housing, right? How is this helping us in the goals that we have as a town, as a committee? So using that as a roadmap, right? So it's about doing a little bit of research. It's about understanding where we are today. Virginia was like, I want to look at some maps to see where the water and sewer is running today, and understand maybe where there's potential for extension, right? And then like, how do we get there? Like what needs to get done to maybe get there to help support the housing initiative? Same with like a loan, a housing fund, right? What could that do for us as a community? And it could be a roadmap to say, hey, maybe we take that to the select board and say, we want to create this fund. This is how to get funded, etc. Maybe that's a long-term goal. Maybe that's not a short-term goal, but being able to see like, how could we as a committee help influence some of these different.
Does anybody have experience grant writing within our committee?
I don't.
I mean,
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a grant writer.
yeah,
There you go.
Okay.
and as support, I can write grants and support your grants too. But eventually there's a process you go through with the select board. You have to get approval to even pursue the grant. You have to make sure that we have the monies for the matching, which is usually it's an 80-20. They're called the ground beef percentage, and ours is 20%. So.
Yeah, I found that interesting when Carl was discussing their funds. They focused on, I don't know what the terminology was, non-returnable. They got the dollars. It didn't have to be burned by a certain date, and it's kind of like a piggy bank that they can continue to stockpile for ammunition.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can do services in kind, which means, some of our highway department can help with certain things, but it depends on the grant, obviously. We're talking about housing grants. So, I've always thought and I know I beat the drum on this all the time, is to set the environment for a developer. And that is to potentially offer pilots, payment in lieu of taxes. There is something that can come out of the fund that can help, again, taxes, your fees for hooking up for water and sewer and so on and so forth. There's just so many little things that you can do to entice. So that's the avenue I'd like to go down too, as far as setting the environment. That's just one leg of the stool, so to speak.
Yeah, I lean a lot towards, I don't know a silly thing about it. So I think that spending the time to see what options are out there for assistance programs, because really everything we're talking about costs money, and money is going to be the key factor in everything. Water sewer expansion is unbelievably expensive, and there's all sorts of voting procedures around it. Even if we change things, that's a long discussion. But if we have money in play and powerful grant writers and or third parties, I can think of quite a few potential volunteers that could do some diligence that are retired that like to dabble in this stuff. So I think that honestly needs to be a very like almost a primary focus in my opinion is where can we find the dollars to help support this? Because that
Yeah,
was a
there's
takeaway that I had from Carl and Ben. It's like a private public partnership. And to Keith's point, if there's opportunities to, for lack of better terms, barter services, it's cheaper for the town to barter highway department labor and or resources to expedite timelines, which saves the developer money and has a more a better product in the end that the town supports because they're touching it the entire way. So I think maybe I'm crazy, but money that should be a very important piece of this puzzle.
You're not crazy. I mean, one thing I spent a good deal of time on today was called this neighborhood designation that you can have. Currently, we do have a village designation, but the neighborhood designation could be a potential help too. And again, that goes towards setting that environment to attracting a developer. And these are specific. The type of things that I'm talking about are specific to developers who are affordable housing, but it's subsidized housing developers. It's not necessarily affordable housing. And that's where my document comes in that we'll talk about next, the differences between, what does that mean? I mean, affordable housing is an umbrella term. So when you get down to brass tacks and you want subsidies for that, that's when the government comes in. Everything else is off the table. You're on your own. But that subsidized housing is the environment. But regardless, you want to set the environment for any developer, not just subsidized housing. You have to really step it up for the subsidized housing developers, though.
Where would the neighborhood designation fall under? Is that a zoning thing that's not really?
Well, it's something that would be put on, it would be in the zoning, and what it does is it not reduces the hurdles through Act 250 to a certain extent. It doesn't offer a heck of a lot. It offers a little bit, it offers that you can't, based on Act 47, and I'm just getting into this, is you can't, challenge it based on the community, the way the community looks, or something along those lines. Or
the character of the neighborhood.
That's it. The character of the neighborhood. You can't challenge that. But how much does it streamline it? I don't know at this point, to be honest with you.
I mean, it's a very helpful piece because that's if you look at the bullet points of Act 250 and the various types of objections, it's about as vague as it could possibly get. Right. I mean, the character of the neighborhood is a very subjective thing that doesn't have a data point tied to it. And it also, unfortunately, in our modern 2024 world is a ripe opportunity for discrimination. So it's kind of just it makes sense with their approach. Are there other neighborhood designations that would make sense for us to pursue?
Well, I would highly suggest that you review the third page of the document, because it has all the links and to the state agencies that have it. It has the law, and it has a lot of definitions from planning organizations on a lot of these things. Yes, if you go down to housing links on the bottom under other resources. That's the housing authority right there. There's a few other things. I kind of put this on a document for you guys to study a little bit and come up to speed on everything. And there's a myriad of approaches. I mean, there really are. I mean, you also have the Vermont Community Development Office also that runs a lot of these programs. But they're all 80-20.
Perfect. So just getting back to here, Connie, did you want to say something?
I did think, Mark, I'm thinking about the question about what's the goal, what's the end goal? And we have a charter, and the charter has pretty long-term goals. But I'm thinking back to past meetings with the select board, and I wonder if Lisa was still on the line. Because my sense is that after a couple of presentations that the housing committee did to the select board about, gee, there's really not much to develop here in Richmond, we're going to really have to change a lot to find more ways to add more houses. That was followed by a town meeting conversation that had to do with a baseball park. And it seems to me that the upshot for the select board was our community needs to both be well informed, and also inform its governance, its leadership about what it wants for housing. Not solely from the NIMBY and the YIMBY perspective, but with a little more depth and clarity. And I'm not sure if I'm remembering that right, and I wondered if Lisa could speak to that.
There. Okay. I'm sorry. I muted myself. Did you want me to speak to that?
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't hear much.
If you would.
Okay. I'll react to what I think I heard. Yeah. To sum it up, the select board sees that the subject of housing in Richmond is really difficult. I don't think anybody would disagree with that anyway, but the available land is not much. The cost prohibits a lot of the types of development that would be the most useful to the average population. Commercial space is not popular, not just in Richmond, but across this swath of Vermont. So that means that jobs may not be as available for the new homeowners as we'd like them to be, and then they have to commute. So, and there is no public transit. That's another drawback. So we have a lot of kind of unrelated obstacles that we're trying to navigate through. And the housing committee, honestly, I think the housing committee is essential. And thank you, folks, for being here, because you are getting at the issues that we can work on. We can't change the inflation rate. We can't change the cost of materials. We can't change the amount of land that we do have or don't have, or doesn't flood ever or whatever. But we can work with those obstacles and devise pathways around them. Or maybe we find that we've got to change some of our regulations. Maybe they are too strict. So, I don't think we have any answers from that yet, but we have a lot of input, and there's a lot of raw facts to work with, and we don't need to plow through all those, each time. But I don't see yet that we have a comprehensive strategy coming out of this.
Correct.
And that's not for lack of effort, by the way. I mean, there are people, housing committee among others, who are working on this and really want housing to improve. Virginia Clark has made it kind of her personal mission, and yet it's not an easy one to solve.
Well, I think that's where, hopefully we can build some type of strategy, and this is kind of based on what levers do we have as a town, right? We can set an environment, but it's like if you build it, then they will come, right? Strategy, right? It's like we can't force anybody to do any development in here,
right?
But make it easier, right? And so
yeah, exactly. Mark, thank you for saying that. That's exactly right. We're a lot stronger than any one person, and collectively we do work well together. And I'd like to see more of that. We can come up with solutions, or maybe at least policies that we can try and see how they work. If they don't work, we modify them. It's an iterative process, I think, in the long run.
Matt, you had a comment?
Yeah, so as I see it, I kind of tend to agree a lot with Virginia's sentiments, at least from previous meetings and working with her. Is I think most of this comes down to local zoning, especially when we look at, because Richmond does have such poor land availability for a multitude of reasons. We haven't hit the crossover point yet where
Mhm.
It's more valuable, the land is more valuable to develop than it is for a single family home. Currently, because of the lack of density in units, we are unable to, developers do not, there's no point, you're not gonna outpace the continued sale of dilapidated single families on large lots, because there's not the numbers don't work out.
Mhm.
And so that's until that is changed. And I know Virginia has been trying to work with the planning commission to kind of step by step address this zoning district by zoning district.
Mhm.
Nothing will change because all these other matters are secondary. Even if you expand water sewer, again, all these other different things we're all working on are secondary to being able to make it so it's, oh wow, you have an acre. Wow, now I could build 20 units or 30 units on that acre, whatever
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
numbers add up to be. So
Mhm.
that has to be the change. Unfortunately, as I see it, right, we represent a small minority of individuals in Richmond, and we want to see more housing for a multitude of reasons, but it's difficult, seeing so many people just want to keep it the way it is. And I don't know how it's like, how do you change that mindset? And that's really kind of the crux of the situation.
Mhm.
And again, we have all these compounding issues. I mean, this flooding is just continuing to get worse. It's making more and more areas basically need to be, bulldozed, right? For lack of a better word. Anyways, so that's kind of my piece, but I think it all kind of starts at a local kind of regulation level with zoning.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on forever about this, but it really feels, I think the main reason why that, maybe not the main, one of the predominant reasons why that redevelopment cost of that lot can't compete with somebody wanting to buy that lot as a single family home is because there's not enough other single family homes on the market. So if you take that property that recently we've talked about on a recent meeting on Main Street, the last one that sold for 425 and was basically a teardown, looked like a teardown. In a normal market, that's a $200,000 property, even with rehab or whatever adjusted for inflation. But because there's not other single family properties to buy, which we could look outside of where it's prohibitive to develop right in town, in core Richmond right now. I guess my point is we often have I want to fix this problem today. I want to fix it next month, next year, but none of this will be solved in the next decade. It's probably 30 years it's like a 30 to 50 year plan to transition our housing stock out of 1900, 1920 housing stock into modern day housing stock. And you really start at that zoning level. And I think what would help to educate the community on is if we change this zoning code, what's not going to happen is there's not going to be 17 Winooski style apartment buildings in Richmond overnight. It doesn't work still because we don't have enough other housing. But if we map it out for a 10-year, a 20-year, a 30-year, a 50-year vision and plan of the downtown corridor and the surrounding, identify it by different ag districts, I think that might give a vision of where things could go and help people understand that it's not about tearing down every single old home in Richmond and renovating them. Does that make sense? I mean, that's because all those homes are such a risk that get flooded every single year. I feel awful for what they have to go through. At some point, you can't keep reinvesting into that housing stock. It's going to become same thing in Montpelier. It's going to be really tough.
Lisa, you had another comment there.
Yeah, I have kind of a question for Keith. Keith, when is the next edition of the town plan due to be worked on?
It's due to be, it's due to land in front of the select board in 2016, and we're going to be starting to pick that up next year, early next year or later this year.
Okay.
You mean 2026?
What did I say? Did I say
2016?
Oh wow, boy, you can see where my mind is.
How you doing?
Yes, 2026, my friends.
Yeah.
See, the reason I bring that up is that might be a really good place to put a long statement about what we're trying to accomplish with housing. We'll have, the last town plan, I've got one handy here, but I forget how many pages. It's a big document.
Yep.
That thing can contain, it's a big house, a big tent, essentially. It can contain a lot of data,
Mhm.
a lot of cross references, a lot of material of all sorts. And that might be the only way to put a comprehensive housing plan together that people can read and then come back and read again, question it, come back and read it again, and maybe eventually understand it, or at least use it. So
Yeah, I would say the current plan that we have, and those are 8-year plans, is pretty aggressive. And we try to implement that as a planning commission, and to a certain extent as a DRB also, but you get so much pushback. I mean, that's really, I mean, to what Andrew was saying, there's an attitude in the town, and change is threatening. It doesn't have to be, change doesn't have to be threatening, but a lot of people take it that way.
Right.
And that is the real barrier. I mean, it is already written in the town plan. It's the number 3 priority after businesses and walkability. And complete streets. It is the housing, but they're all very close together at that point. We get a lot of pushback at the planning commission on those.
There's a saying about change that I think the saying goes, it's sometimes for the better, it's usually necessary, and it's always inevitable.
Yes.
That's what I'd like to put on a billboard or something, because it is inevitable. We're all getting old. Some won't be here in 50 years or 10 years.
But the problem is folks out there and folks that have a lot of clout don't want that inevitability.
Yeah,
they don't believe in that.
Yeah.
And it's not just Richmond. That's the mindset of
human nature.
People's DNA.
We reach our comfort zone, we wallow in it, we really don't want to come out of it. We want that comfort, and we defend it, even if it's not the best comfort we could have. We defend it because we have it.
Yep.
So
yep.
It's hard to break that mindset.
So I'd say, like, most of the comments around barriers, right, are public, zoning, and policies, strategies, right, are kind of those different levers that are identified here in this strategy document. So just to kind of bring it full circle here, right? I hear that we need to work on zoning changes, zoning recommendations, right? And that's going to be a long pull. But I would say that other long pulls are, right, like water sewer regulation. I don't think that's something that's going to get fixed or changed or adjusted overnight. Putting together housing funds, right? Like that's another long pull. So I don't see that we can maybe focus on any one aspect per se, and put them in series. Is about working on them in parallel. So I guess this, in my mind, was the best way to start, like, organizing our thoughts and creating some type of output from the community, right? Because I think we can sit here and debate and talk and chat for many meetings, right? But what is it that we're actually trying to move or accomplish? So my thought is this is a good approach. I don't know, maybe there's something better out there, but looking for some thought and input, like, what is the output that we want to have as a committee in terms of making recommendations.
Well, I'll add that I think we have to keep it pretty simple and very straightforward to be productive. There's only a few of us, and this isn't our jobs and life. So I think we really have to hone in on a couple of these key points that we think are the best levers to attempt to alter, manipulate, change in a manner that provides a better opportunity for the town and for growth.
Yep.
you have 6 or 7 like bullet points that we're attacking, I feel like it'll just be fewer things done at a lower level versus really focusing on what we feel might be the 3 best pieces of the agenda.
So, Andy, do you see anything missing on the list here, or ones that we want to double bold here, highlight? I mean, I think we've talked about zoning, right?
Yeah,
As-
zoning has to be on the rundown.
Um,
Do
I've
you have,
heard a lot about community support, right?
I was gonna add the community outreach portion of all that. You've got to lock that down.
I think that these things that we're talking about lead us to the first bullet point. Without some strong tax abatement programs, policy strategies, water sewer renovations, dollar bills, housing funds, community support, you won't be able to have a partnership development and project advocacy. So that seems like the outcome of the other actions below. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it almost seems like a good read in reverse, where doing these activities, if we successfully focus on these 3 line items, we hope to achieve these 3 results: stronger partnerships with, leading people into home ownership opportunities, and whatever else we think would be a repercussion of this over a 10 to 50 year window.
So am I highlighting tax
Yeah,
abatement?
I wasn't really throwing out anything to highlight, just kind of I'm spitballing a
Okay.
bit about how I view this doc and where I think kind of like how my brain works around the structure of it and what the outcomes would be. Essentially, the first bullet point seems like a potential result of the others, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be futile to go courting developers now anyways, right? Because
Exactly.
we don't have the environment where they want to participate.
Yeah, we don't know what we have. We haven't done a true analysis of if we do XYZ, then we're not going to be Heinsberg. Heinsberg's got another 48 unit development that just hit the market. They have the first 10 lots out. That's not us, and that's fine because of our restrictions. So I think part of all this needs to identify what's realistic and not idealistic around it. And the water sewer is a piece that strongly contributes to what's realistic. So I think we should understand what our capacity is to work within our bounds. And if there were areas to extend to, this is where it makes the most sense. It's this road and this road.
I would add,
Yeah.
I would add going up also needs to be considered. The prohibition on 35-foot tall buildings really reduces the amount of units you can get in the water and sewer district. And this is something that one of the board members, the select board members, had brought up. Going up is definitely the cheapest way to do things and more bang for the buck. So
1000%.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you could find a middle ground where, because you see it with single family dwellings too. If you look at any new wastewater permit or town approval on a property, it almost always references, sometimes they're even moving it down further. Like Warren, I think they're dropping below 35 feet for new structures because they're littering the mountainside. So you could do a compromise where you maybe apply one thing to single family outside certain zoning areas and then focus on your village neighborhood district that allows for, in these corridors, 50 feet or whatever the number is that allows for 1 to 2 more stories of, because that's the difference maker in these projects. That really is, to have 2 affordable units out of 20 probably doesn't work. But if you can put in 40 and have 8 affordable units that are at 100% AMI, the developer can make it work, the town can make it work. And then it's a win-win for all parties.
Well,
falls right into zoning.
Yeah, it certainly helps. It certainly helps with your lot coverage, because that's an impediment and Matt knows that. I mean, that's an impediment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's Andrew, it's definitely, and Keith, it's the combination between lot coverage, unit density, and height restrictions that cause basically the nail in the coffin for, I think, a lot of developments to happen. And Winooski is really interesting to me. I know we don't want to be Winooski, but they set up, obviously they have their gateway corridor, is what they call it. And I think the height restriction there is like 65 feet for those buildings. So it's doable to have in these, to have these larger, taller, more dense buildings. And you don't have to say, it doesn't mean that, you have to, that every single building being built is going to be 65 feet tall, you can limit it to the certain corridors, the Bridge Street corridor, is kind of seems like the most likely current area that would happen on. Whatever. Anyways.
Yeah, if you just look at the basic current land use, just on our one token stoplight and the properties surrounding it, the land use there is, if an appraiser came through, they'd say, this is the lowest use of this current land right here, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to delve into, another conversation, but we have problems where we have a building that might be a commercial space, but it's one commercial space, right? In a very old building, has a ton of community, like people love it. It provides a really good service, but it's such an underutilized piece of land. And that happens in a lot of spots there along that corridor.
Yeah, ideally that they would keep their commercial right there and put 3 stories of
exactly
wonderful affordable housing right above it.
Totally.
That's change.
I mean, I think the housing fund piece, that seems like it's got to be a discussion, to Keith's point, with the people that have more power than we do. I don't know how much focus we can put into that until we get go ahead or a green light of some sort where, the town will listen to anything that we dig up. I think that would be a very basic investigation, and they might just say, no, we got no money for it, so go away.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. I believe almost like this is in way in the future. And personally, I think we should just be happy if we could come up with some recommendations to the planning commission or select board regarding, if we're trying to have, a win here, so to speak, some recommendations to the planning commission or the select board that's literally speaks to, a developer would love if the lot unit density was 20 units per acre, not 5, that would be like that. If that change could be made, it would make a huge difference, because some people wouldn't want to sell their homes, but some people that are looking to, they have an older home or whatever, looking to leave and retire or whatever, it would be a slow change, right? But it would be, and that would be a win, right? For all of us to be able to help influence a change like that and explain why and how, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's my point, where it takes 20 years, because a smart long-term investor would look at that. Okay, they changed their zoning to X units. They buy 123 Main Street. 7 years later, they buy 125 Main Street, and 11 years later, they buy 127 Main Street. And now they have 3 in a row. It took 25 years to get there, but all that housing stock is 1900, and now it's redeveloped and it's 2050, and most of us are dead. It seems like a really smart approach. Is there a go-to outside of I don't know, I'm not from Richmond, looking at this community sport and outreach, who is the most respected dirty word developer from Richmond that might have good vibes with people that typically object to projects? Is there somebody out there that fits that bill that we could chat with?
Not Parisi, of course.
Yeah, I think it's Gary Bresser, actually.
Yeah.
Gary Bresser's been around. I went to school with his kids, and Gary he owns a lot of land. Huntington, Richmond area, but he has consistently redeveloped old housing stock because of, that's kind of been his niche. It's kind of been my niche a little bit too, but yeah, he pretty much does the most development here in the Richmond area. And so that kind of speaks to where we're at, right? There's a lot of guys like me who are doing, we do, 1 or 2 units here and there, maybe 3, the big condo complex that was done in the 80s was done by the Carters. The condo complex is the one right off of East Main Street.
Yeah.
I don't remember the address, but whatever. That was like the biggest one done really probably in the last, other than the one down, the affordable housing one down on near the hardware store there. Those are the last 2 big ones done in the last 40 years.
Well, you do have the big elephant, and that's Jelena Court.
Right, which is kind of like a moving target. It's part of it's done, but
it's 3 acres of developable land, and it's shovel ready.
Right.
And this is all in a microcosm of what the town of Richmond is about. You're trying to pull teeth to move forward with that because of the change that comes along with it. They are ready to go with 31.
Yeah.
But they have the prohibition of commercial. I don't think that's an issue. That's not an issue for the planning commission. It is the density is the issue. And parking.
I'm going to be entering Barry Montpelier, which means I'm going to lose phone call. And I just wanted to say, I appreciate and support this conversation. It's been great to listen to. I agree with pick 2 or 3 things that we can focus on that are good leverage points. It sounded like it was the planning, zoning ordinances. It sounded like it was the process of moving through the development activities, the function, and it sounded like it was community outreach, education support. So I am glad to sign up and support those, and I just wanted to make sure, I don't know if we're going to come to a vote or anything, but I definitely support those ideas. Thanks for letting me butt in.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I have the ones highlighted on the screen. I think we talked about water sewer policy strategies, assistance programs, community support, and zoning. So if we narrow down to that, we can get rid of deprioritize a housing fund. Does that sound good as a next step, is to have some assignments and people start like digging in a little bit more, formulating thoughts. I think that's the piece, is like formulating thoughts and getting something on paper for us to have to really discuss and refine.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind adding. I think I can come up with, just because of numbers, what I do, giving some, again, it would be kind of along the zoning recommendations line. And that would probably be where I'm best suited to help this committee. In terms
What about that, and just any policies or strategies, maybe not tax abate, but just like any other strategies that maybe aren't policies that aren't zoning related? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's, that talks more about that's certainly a larger scale developer. I know in St. Albans, I've done some stuff there. They have, again, which is like, however we want to call it, tax abatement programs, TIF programs, tax incentive financing. That is all interesting stuff. It is nothing I've utilized before. And it's usually done for much larger corporations that are, for example, Walmart wants to go in and they have to pay into this, fund in order to then revitalize the downtown, so to speak.
So maybe that's not something we want to focus on right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And Keith might even have a better point to this too, where like TIF financing would work here, except for, maybe the buttermilk project could finish if they were able to get some kind of TIF financing where their taxes were reduced or locked at a certain amount until they're able to pay off a loan or something. There's different ways they can work it around. I think if I understood it from Virginia correctly, a lot of their problem is the current financing issues. Well, how do we alleviate an issue like that? Okay, well, the town could say, for 20 years, we're not going to tax you at a certain rate or something, and that'll work it out. But after that 20 is a random number. It's not a number I'm actually pointing out. The taxes, will obviously be 100% market value, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's so controversial. We would have to focus on the community outreach before we got there. Every town that I see that really goes through those programs, based on what I've heard and seen in minutes of meetings and feedback from customers and clients in the real estate world, I just think that it will run to a brick wall with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be clear, the way St. Albans City did it, which was super effective, was they used funds from like a much larger development. Like I said, it was Walmart, and I think one other company that went in there, and it was a huge one-time impact fee. And then they use those funds to then revitalize their downtown, as opposed to,
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's how they did all their buried utilities and that whole construction project down there. Yeah.
The whole Main Street rebuild there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're reaping the benefits of that now too,
Right.
And I mean, Mark, I think just like a bullet point from that tax abatement program, just you could move that to a future conversation, but there is the opportunity. Impact fees are often more substantial water and sewer, so just a piece of that could flow into the water sewer conversation and analysis and review to see what truly are these impact fees and how we have no sway over it, but what's the bottom line mean, and that's yeah.
Well, I think those approaches really lend themselves to the subsidized housing developers, though. And I think that was my point, was, the pilots, the tax abatements, the hookup fees, if they're reduced, you're not going to get public buy-in on somebody who's a for-profit, but you probably would have more of a chance to get buy-in for somebody who's a nonprofit. And
I think that's a mixed bag. We know, Keith, because a lot of people get scared when you talk about affordable or nonprofit, that you're going to end up with certain issues. I think we're walking on a tightrope, really. It's
and that's where the perfect storm is. The private public, both parties have a vested interest in it. That's
right.
Finding the way to put those pieces together where both people are vested, both entities are vested, is probably the best outcome, because everybody has somebody to answer to, including each other.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Alex's email that I've shared with you all is pretty much on point. And to me, it's kind of the blueprint that we should be working off of. But that's just me as your planner. You guys have to make those decisions. He's really laid it out to us all, to be honest with you.
Okay. All right. Well, we're down to 4 sections. Seem more manageable? Does that seem more manageable? So
if I could just add one more thing.
Yep.
As your planner, as you're going along this process, and I know that you don't have a ton of time, but if you have some things that you don't have time to research, shoot them to me. I'll spend some time on that. And then, I'll get right back to you on what my timing would be on that. If you need, me to delve into something that you don't have time for, let me know. That's what I'm here for.
So can I just change this name to Keith here? Is that what you're saying?
No. No, not at all. Not at all. No, I'm here to support you folks.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think everyone's on a section that's highlighted in yellow. Does it make sense that we want to check in on some progress between now and the next meeting? Maybe we can at least have one of our, questions answered up above, and review what maybe we have pulled together so far, or some thoughts.
Sure. Are we allowed to edit this document? This is a little fishy to me because of the open meeting law there. Are we allowed to edit this document online? All of it? I'm just, as long as we're not together, we can edit it or add, add things to it, or,
My understanding is as long as we're not meeting in quorum.
okay.
So we couldn't all sign up for water and sewer policy and all go meet on, next Wednesday afternoon
Yeah.
and chat about it
Without
Yeah,
it being warned.
without
Yeah,
being warned.
I
Yes.
just physically meant like actually editing, on this document.
Knock yourself out. Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it should all be shared. And I think that's within scope.
Keith, I mean, something that would be helpful for me, it's dated information, but I know a lot of people put a lot of energy and research into how much it costs to run water and sewer down towards the mobile station and the mobile park. Can you send that to me? Because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. That's like a prime corridor to
Yeah,
add very affordable housing.
and that number would probably be from 2017 or so, or
So it's
my
twice the
favorite
number.
2016. So,
Yeah.
somewhere around
I
there.
mean, it's probably twice the cost now. And I felt like I saw things flying around on Front Porch Forum that said it was going to be like 1.7 mil or something like that to do all the infrastructure. But I'd love to see that. That would be helpful.
Did they ever break it out by foot, by linear foot, or?
Probably, but there was a bunch of chatter about when the highway department was using that guy's land and he got money for, and everybody was complaining about everything. And he said he volunteered to pay it. And there was a bunch of numbers on Front Porch Forum. I have no clue how
Yeah,
accurate they were.
to connect to Riverview and also to the gateway. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I can research that.
Yeah, the linear foot cost would absolutely be the most interesting, because then you could, in theory, kind of play it out with, how far it would be to certain neighborhoods that don't have it currently.
Yes. And like the idea that in my head is, I mean, somebody just bought I think it was a 97 acre tract of land and they're putting one house on it. And it's
I saw it. Yeah.
Jay
Jericho
McCormick.
Road?
He's right on Jericho Road. Yeah, he's a realtor and bought the land and he's putting one single house. The road itself is wide enough to accommodate 2 semis. His driveway is.
Yeah.
The zoning regulation allows it, and that's another issue right there. Yeah, but don't be surprised if he subdivides it. So I mean,
Yeah,
obviously
they should, but he could have a beautiful neighborhood if he had water and sewer.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, just in terms of other business, I know we had talking about reviewing the housing definitions list. Anything you wanted to add there real quick, Keith?
No, just review it. I mean, it's pretty,
Okay.
it's for lay people, and you guys aren't lay people at this point, but I mean, it's just a quick and dirty. This is what this says, this is what that says, and it has links to each and every one of them. So, I mean, it's definitely something that you can wrap your arms around pretty quickly. And that's the intent.
Okay. Great. What do we want to talk about for next meeting? So I think reviewing progress on our strategies would be a next meeting topic. Any guests that come to mind that we want to invite, or others? Yes, Lisa.
Question: is there anybody in Vermont that anyone knows of who has gone through this sort of process? Even if it wasn't successful, but especially if it was, I guess they'd be famous. But is there sort of a mentor out there that could be a speaker or kind of a gadfly at the table?
Meaning the process of building the strategy?
Yes, what we're trying to do here. Yeah, I mean, on a not even necessarily housing related, that would help a lot, I think. But is there somebody out there who has been through this sort of coalition building and, hammering out details that we know of? Maybe Keith would know. There's somebody.
Well, Alex Weinhagen is the one that I know. There, I mean, there's some people. Taylor Taylor Newton at CCRCP would potentially be able to come in and talk about that because he's really experienced. I think he had some involvement in the St. Albans stuff up there because he was part of that regional planning commission, I believe. Off the top of my head, but I mean Alex would be the one, but his time is so limited.
Yeah.
You know, at this point, and
tuning
I've
in?
only been here for 3.5 years, so I really haven't developed those relationships either. So I'm not copping out. That's just a fact.
Yeah. Keith, do you think he'd tune in by phone, for 15 minutes or something? I want to minimize it to the point of not being any work.
I could ask him. It seems that we're getting Heinsberg centric though, and I think we know what we need to do. I mean, I'm not sure, if we want to take the time with only one meeting a month on this, but that's my view. That's not mine. It's whatever the board wants, I'll support it.
I'd love to have somebody on the Water Sewer Commission on here or somebody in zoning that can answer all of our pointed questions. That would be more helpful to me because I don't know what I don't know when it comes to these things. Matt's going to be way more educated than most of us when it comes to that.
Well, I've got the zoning aspect covered. I am your assistant zoning administrator, so
check.
So there you go on that. I could speak anytime you want me to.
I'm on the Water and Sewer Commission, but I was appointed, 2 meetings ago?
That's a great idea.
That's about how much I know so far, but I'm not afraid to ask for things. I've got time to wander on down there, talk to the superintendent, and, if we need to look at records or history or whatever, I'd be glad to dig up information and find out, get answers for you.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing I want to wrap my head around is the voting process for expansion. It seems convoluted. That's what that's the drawback.
It does seem convoluted, and if that could be fixed, that might be. The biggest thing that I've heard is that the existing users of sewer and water system don't want a rate increase because of expansion.
Exactly.
And I understand them. They're not getting anything out of that so why pay for it? So that would need to be headed off right away. Anything that's done to the rate structure or the coverage would have to include that kind of explanation right up front, or people would fight it. No.
I know Bard's been on that committee for a while though.
Yes.
I think he would be able to speak to any of your questions on that. So that's one. I think he's been on that committee for like 4 cycles now or something.
I think you're right, Keith. Yeah. I could ask Bard.
I think also having might not be next meeting, but if we like to have guests and it brings other perspective is kind of, Gary might be a good guy, the small to medium developer, because I think Gary has done the houses that he's done in a way that everyone, even though his own house has not done yet, which is whatever, but the ones he does finish and sells or whatever are done very well. And nobody is apprehensive at them, right? Because they have that classic New England architecture, and it stays in character with the town, even though you might not know it's a duplex that's sold as, condos or whatever. And that probably has some inroads there. That's kind of been his niche, and he's been doing it for a while. So
Gary's a free thinker too. He has some really out of the box ideas sometimes. He looks.
We did have him join us. Wasn't that Gary? I think maybe last year, the year before, about his sidewalk idea, connecting the town with out where the mobile station is, slash the mobile home park. Yeah. So
he's not giving up on that either, but I don't know if you know the latest conversation about that, but it's something, let me see if I can retrieve something out of my memory, but there's bridge work that's going to be happening on the interstate. That looks like Gary said, that's a really big opportunity for us to kind of like wedge our plans in there, whatever they are. Of course, this is all fairly far in the future, but that gives us time to develop something. If there were a pathway, crossing the interstate is the hardest part for that pathway, and the on and off ramps. So if that work is going on and we've got a plan that becomes part of the work, wow, we've got it. Even have a use for it yet. Maybe we get that, and then we figure out how to connect to it somewhere else.
We're gonna have to get
Yep.
out of here. Sorry.
Yep, I know we're at time here. The library committee has our Zoom link, needs our Zoom link next. So if there's no other business, we'll call the meeting and we'll connect next month. So thank you very much.
Warn them about the photo bombs.
Yes. Good to see you all.
Okay.
Thank you all.